Question: 12 Gavr-built drones skim the water at 140 kilometers per hour, then thread through power lines and hangars at Gavr Discoya, and 6 Igla-S missiles still can't touch them. How? You're in the right place. In the next minutes, we'll unpack the 2 flaws that made Russian defenses stumble: Tor's low-altitude blind spot and heat seekers that lose targets against a sunlit sky. We'll also break down the 628 to 621 window when GPS jamming forced a switch to inertial nav, and why the swarm held formation anyway. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. They saw blips, then nothing. The question everyone inside that battery asked later was simple: why did the returns fade right at 10 meters? The answer starts offshore. 12 garage-built airframes pushed off small sea platforms, props biting into cool morning air, holding 140 kilometers per hour. They skimmed the wavetops long enough to make the patrol grid late, then slanted inland on a shallow line toward Gavr Discoya, hugging the shoreline's uneven contour to keep any one sensor from staring at them for more than a heartbeat. A Russian patrol boat cut across their path first. Tracers went wide as the sea chop threw off aim. The Romans' BN electronic warfare system was faster GPS fields filled with nonsense positions, a curtain of false fixes that dragged map icons into the bay. Operators watching their ground stations killed satellite input and went inertial. From that point, the formation rode gyros and magnetometers, using dead reckoning to hold spacing. They didn't need perfect accuracy yet. They needed consistency through the jamming bubble while closing the base's perimeter. Now the radar piece. Tor doesn't paint the whole sky at once. It steps its search through elevation slices, cycling low, medium, high, and back again on a loop that lasts a few seconds, that creates a timing gap at very low altitude. If a target crosses the beam while it looks elsewhere, the scope shows nothing until the next pass. Add sea clutter and the problem compounds. Slow, small shapes blend into the bright noise where water meets land. Wakes from the patrol boat and the bulk of its hull cast reflections and shadows that tangle with the return from a drone the size of a lawnmower. Dawn stacked more problems. Warm water under cooling air built thin fog pockets along the approach. The rising sun threw glare across the lens at a shallow angle. Thermal crossover wiped contrast at the exact moment when the electro-optical channel could have confirmed a faint track. The crew needed a clean look and got a wash of light instead. By the time the optics cut the bloom, the sweep had already stepped past low again. Inside a kilometer, the altitude game began in earnest. The drones held roughly 10 meters above ground and used the base's own structures as cover. Berms blocked a slice of the radar horizon. Hangar roofs broke lines of sight between the radar and the drone's fuselages. Power pylons stood like posts in a maze, their frames and cables carving thin shadow lanes where small movers could slip by with weaker returns. Each structure didn't hide them fully. The overlap did. They rode the steps, not the stairs, slipping from one shadow to the next. This isn't the first time a low RCS, sub 200 km/h target has threaded that needle. Crews have missed slow movers by learning the rhythm of a search radar's rotation and crossing at the sweep edge, where one update ends and another begins. When the beam rolls past and the filter assumes ground clutter, anything coasting just below the threshold looks like more scenery. TOR did get a grip once. The display showed a lock, then it fell off as the formation cut across the bottom of the scan and dropped into the noise along the perimeter road. The operator re-queued, flipped to the optics, and lost contrast again as flare off the water lit the frame. Seconds matter in that loop, and those seconds were burned chasing returns. The weakness wasn't a single sensor failure. It was the thin, low-altitude slice where coverage cycles, clutter rejection, and timing left a lane wide enough for a dozen small airframes to cross the fence. With the battery hunting lost tracks and resetting priorities, the next layer stepped forward, shoulder-fired missiles searching for heat that wasn't there. Tor's scopes were still resetting when the first teams ran out from the blast walls with Igla-S tubes on their shoulders. The drones had already slipped inside the perimeter and were threading the base's interior, crossing taxiways at mast height and then flattening out along the gaps between hangars. Power lines on each quadrant forced the gunners to hustle for a clear lane. They got tones, lost them, got them again when a fuselage edged against a darker backdrop. Then the sound faded as the drone moved back into a bright sky. A squad leader called for a shot. The first missile left smoke, climbed, and then drifted off axis as the seeker argued with glare and a target that barely warmed the air around it. Here's why those tones lied. A heat seeker looks for contrast, not just heat. The Igla-S uses a cooled sensor to read tiny differences in infrared and ultraviolet energy. That works well when a target throws a hot exhaust cone or turbine face at it. A small electric motor or a low-heat piston engine does not. At slow closure rates, the drone's signature hardly changes pixel to pixel, which makes the seeker hesitate. Add a sunlit sky washing the field with broad-spectrum energy, and you get false highlights that the filter must reject. Every rejection eats time. While the logic sorts noise from truth, the drone is already somewhere else. The second and third teams tried to fire at closer range as the airframes crossed a service road. That introduced a new problem. Missiles need space to arm safety systems wait for a set distance and time before the warhead will respond to a fuse. A shot taken inside that window risks a direct pass with no detonation. Even after arming, the proximity fuse wants a certain signature to confirm a valid target. If the drone gives off little heat and the relative speed is low, the timing can be off by meters. That is how a missile can streak past a wing and not go off, leaving only turbulence to rock the airframe. Inside the maze, the drone operators walked a needle. They aligned their routes with shadow corridors thrown by hangar rows, then skirted the power line envelopes at near mast height that denied clean angles to the gunners and forced shots through narrow gaps where tracking takes longer to stabilize. A gunner leaned out from the lee of a vehicle shelter, caught a brief tone as a drone crossed a darker hangar face, launched, and watched the smoke trail curve away when the background flipped back to sky. The jamming twist hit again. Roman's BN kept feeding bogus GPS data around the ramps, so the operators stayed on inertial navigation for the 0628 to 0621 window. Gyros and accelerometers carried heading and speed. Magnetometers kept rough bearing, and dead reckoning held the formation's spacing. Drift crept in, but the base itself gave them a way to correct it once inside. One airframe crossed a taxiway hash at a known offset, nudged left 2 degrees to cancel accumulated error, and then keyed off a hangar corner to lock the next leg. Another used the distance between runway edge lights to verify ground speed, then snapped back into the pack as the EW blanket thinned past the fuel farm. By the 6th shot, the pattern was clear. The seekers saw glare instead of a clean heat source. The fuses didn't get the timing they needed, and the drones, flying on inertial cues and quick visual checks, kept their needles threaded through the base's interior until the last firing position had to stand down and reposition for a different axis of approach. Low-altitude blind spots and seeker quirks leave a lane that can be hit again. Not every day, not everywhere, but it's repeatable when timing, clutter, and background glare line up. Cheap airframes take that lane because they don't advertise heat, and they ride structures that bend sensors out of sync. If you want a deeper dive into EW versus inertial nav, or how perimeter redesign, berms, sensor masts, and angled optics shrinks those lanes, let me know in the comments and subscribe for the follow-up next time. We test the same swarm with decoys and dazzlers. Does the lane widen, or do defenders rewrite the playbook overnight?